Hello friends, I am the Anti-Terrorist. Thank you once again for all of your messages of support, your emails and your questions. Speaking of questions, I've been getting questions from skeptics, which from my point of view is a very good thing because it means people are at least engaging their intellect and looking for answers. Or they're looking for theories to debunk, which is also a good thing for the same reasons. Now I've said it once before, but I'll say it again. I'll only present the facts. If I want to engage you in theory or a conversation about possibilities, then I'll create the context for it before I do, so we know what we're actually talking about. Now in this broadcast I'd like to address a question sent from a skeptic. It's a very good question, and it's the foundation for what I imagine is what the sleepers out there hold as the reason not to believe the conspiracy. The question is this: how on earth do you think they, whoever they are, will be able to motivate the army or the police or whatever enforcement body might be prevalent to carry out these atrocities, to control the public in such a way? How can you manipulate one intelligent human being to dominate another without their free will or conscience getting in the way? Well, we'll address the they in a future broadcast, but it's the how I'd like to look at here. Now you only have to review the power Hitler had over his own forces and populace to realize it's entirely possible.
Diesem Deutschland Dienst tut, wird heute Deutschland in stolzer Freude
In the 1930s and 40s, the world witnessed and almost succumbed to the horrors of fascism. By this man's command, war spread across continents. Adolf Hitler had succeeded in creating a social political structure powerful enough to exert total control over the German people. With the help of propaganda on a scale never before seen, the Nazi high command was even able to justify the so-called final solution. Inevitably, social psychologists began to wonder how dictators could transform rational individuals into blindly obedient masses.
But to clarify the process, I'd like to show you some footage from experiments that took place under controlled conditions.
The ultimate conformity.
195 volts.
Total blind obedience to a leader was elicited in a controversial laboratory experiment by this researcher, Stanley Milgram, a former student of Solomon Asch. Milgram wondered whether the evil deeds of the Nazis were the result of their personal defects, or whether anyone has the capacity for evil if the situation is powerful enough. In 1961, when Hitler's henchman Adolf Eichmann was standing trial for war crimes, Milgram wanted to find out how far ordinary people would go in obeying orders. Would they, like Eichmann, execute strangers if they were told to? In Milgram's experiment, a subject was paid to participate in what he thought was a study of memory. He was asked to play the role of teacher, helping someone improve his memory.
You want to step right in here, learner, and have a seat there. You can leave your coat on the back of that chair if you will, please. Take it right off.
Guiding the subject was the experimenter in the lab coat, who acted as the legitimate authority in the situation.
Right up to the counter.
Both the experimenter and the man being tested as the learner were part of Milgram's team. And how was the subject supposed to help the learner improve his memory? By delivering electric shocks as punishment for every mistake.
This machine generates electric shocks, and when you press one of the switches all the way down, the learner gets a shock.
The shocks began as mild, but they had to be increased with each era until they were potentially lethal. Although no shocks were actually given, the teacher subject was made to think he was punishing the learner.
Let me out of here. You have no right to keep me here. Let me out. Let me out of here. Let me out.
Continue, please.
Let me out of here. My eyes bother me.
Go on.
Let me out.
Responsible for it.
Red.
That is incorrect. This will be at 3:30. The correct phrase is rich
Let me out of
boy.
here. Let me out of here. My heart's bothering me. Let me out, I tell you. Let me out of here. Let me out of here. You have no right to hold me
The
here.
next phrase is
Let me out.
fast,
Let me out. Let me out. Let me out of here. Let me out. Let
bird,
me out.
car, train, plane.
Continue, teacher.
What would you do in this situation? Would you continue?
That is incorrect. This will be 345. The correct answer is fast bird. The next one, blunt.
At the time, 40 experts were asked to predict the performance of the subjects. They estimated that most would not go beyond 150 volts, and only 1 in 1,000, the sadists, would go all the way to 450 volts. In fact, 2/3 of the subjects went all the way. While many of them objected, the majority did not disobey.
The experiment requires that you continue teaching.
I asked Stanley Milgram how many of the subjects who quit the experiment ever got up to help the learner without first getting the experimenter's permission. He said, not one, not ever. So blind obedience is not limited to the fascist mentality. It's part of the basic human condition, brought out by situational forces. Hundreds and hundreds of subjects obeyed the experimenter, men and women, young and old. As the author C.P. Snow wrote, when you think of the long and gloomy history of man, you will find more hideous crimes have been committed in the name of obedience than have been committed in the name of rebellion.
And here's a more recent example of stable, intelligent human beings succumbing to the human condition.
Each of the students who volunteered for our study was carefully tested. Each had to be psychologically and physically healthy to participate. A small group of students was then randomly selected to act as prisoners, while others became guards. We surprised the prisoners by having them arrested at their homes and dormitories. At the jail, uniforms and status symbols, rules, and other details helped distinguish between the two groups, which were indistinguishable at the start. The prisoners underwent a series of rituals to establish their new lowly status. They lived in tiny cells. They spent 24 hours a day here, cut off from their usual surroundings.
What is happening to prisoner 819?
Prisoner 819 is being punished, Mr. Correctional Officer.
Let's hear it 5 times. Make sure you remember it.
Prisoner 819 is being punished, Mr. Correctional Officer.
Down. Up. Down.
The guards, however, only worked 8-hour shifts and returned to their normal routines as students when off the job.
Up. 5 for 86. These aren't belly rolls. These are push-ups. Keep that back straight. Down. What do you think he is?
What happened surprised everyone, including me. The illusion became the reality. The boundary between the role each person was playing and his real personal identity was erased.
Goodbye, Mr. Correctional Officer.
Now keep it straight.
Nice boys became brutal guards. Healthy kids got sick.
Get in that traffic then.
Active ones became passive and zombie-like prisoners.
This is unbelievable! They took our clothes.
Hands off the door.
They took our bed.
Hands off the door. Lift your hands.
Get up.
The situation became so overpowering that many of the prisoners developed extreme stress reactions and had to be released.
Take your bed and your clothes and prison.
But no one ever said, I quit the experiment. They had lost all perspective.
You come over there.
Should I act it out, Mr. Correctional Officer?
You should act it out. You be the bride of Frankenstein, and you be Frankenstein. I want you to walk over here like Frankenstein and say that you love 293.
What kind of guard would you be? Sadistic or supportive? Would you be a conforming prisoner or a heroic resistor? At times, even I forgot I was an experimenter and acted like a prison warden.
So I can lock the yard.
And so we were forced to call off what was planned as a 2-week experiment after only 6 days.
I don't think there's much I need to say about that, really. I think it speaks for itself. Of course, awareness of this method of control is far greater these days because we have far more access to information, but I would suggest that they're countering the awareness with disinformation and clandestine operations. They're sneaking policy through without referendums or discussion because we're more awake to the consequences. That's all for this particular broadcast. I hope I've answered your question, and I hope I've made myself clear. As you can see, we're not dealing with monsters here. We're dealing with human beings. Keep asking questions. Engage in the conversation. Wake up the sleepers. Thanks for listening.